Welcome to another episode of Have Game Will Travel. I'm your host, Bennett Newsome, also known as Dammit Bennett in the gaming community. But as the director of esports growth and development here at Full Sail University, I'm super passionate about exploring the diverse world of esports and gaming beyond just skill level. So whether you're a first-time listener or a returning fan, we're thrilled to have you here joining us through this kind of virtual journey through the experience of industry professionals. So get ready to engage with our guests and learn through their perspectives. But remember to submit your questions in chat if you have them. We'll feature them on the show. But sit back, enjoy the ride as we kick off another Have Game Will Travel. I'm super excited to have our guest here today. Today we're featuring Adam Antor, the assistant professor of professional esports production at Ferris State University. Adam, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit. Just talk, briefly about what it is you do, real quick, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. So, last August, I started at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan, as the assistant professor of professional esports production, which is a long title.
It's
but
fancy.
Basically, it sounds pretty fancy. I'm a tenure track full-time professor teaching in the new major they added in fall of 22 in professional esports production. So that's
awesome.
what I do.
Congrats. Well, we're excited to have you here today. Obviously, I think we're going to kind of rewind and go back to the beginning. Growing up, I think most of us played video games, whether competitive or just for fun with your friends. What's kind of like your earliest memory of gaming as a kid?
Yeah, my earliest memory, and my dad might laugh if he hears this, but when I was probably 3 or 4, I have a vivid memory of sitting on his lap while he played SimCity 2000. I have one memory of my dad gaming ever in my entire life, and that is the one.
SimCity, all right.
I think he hung up the idea of gaming shortly after that, maybe focus on the kids and work, but I remember that vividly. And then I don't know if I technically learned how to read playing Pokemon Red, but it encouraged me to learn how to read.
I like that.
So yeah, I had the 64 was pivotal, and my Game Boy Color, which was red, but I played it outside so much it turned pink, was definitely a pivotal piece of my childhood.
I like that you went in a positive way. I learned how to read by playing this game. I always say that I learned how to drive by playing Grand Theft Auto.
There you go.
It worked out, so we're good, right? Right. You took it in a positive way, though. I like that.
Good. Yeah. I think everyone kind of has the same answer. I've always gamed. So I kind of try to skip over that question a little bit as much as possible. But yeah, that's me, just like everybody else in this industry, I think.
Did you think growing up playing games with your friends that esports was a career path for you?
No, never, never. I mean, even in high school, my buddies would we weren't partiers. We would come to my house and game all night long. We had Madden tournaments at night. We did MLG once or twice, but I never would have thought it was a full-time thing ever. Even when 2018, before I got into collegiate full-time, I would have laughed. I actually did laugh. I saw the posting for another college in my city and said, that's not sustainable. I would never apply for that. Yeah. And
here we
are. Month later, I was going full-time in esports.
Awesome.
So yeah.
I like that. What was the first game that you got really passionate about?
Oh gosh.
I feel maybe it's Pokemon because read
No, I think I'd put truly passionate and experience the idea of multiplayer gaming and esports. Maybe it's Halo 3. Halo 3 and the first Modern Warfare kind of, for me, I got them around the same time I got the 360, freshman year of high school or sophomore year of high school. And that was the first experience of staying up till 4 a.m. with people playing custom games on Halo 3, Fat Kid and Duck Hunt. I don't know, for the Halo 3 crowd in there, they'll know what I'm talking about. But that was the true first experience, I think, for me of what the community aspect. And I think that's what opened kind of a passion for gaming more than I had before.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of what makes it special now is that community aspect of esports, and gaming in general, streaming content, like just a bunch of people coming together saying like, hey, I want to be part of this. I want to participate in this, which I feel like it makes it really great. Do you feel like your journey through your teenage years of playing and doing things like that, obviously maybe while laughing at the first post you saw for it, here you are, years later, working in esports. Do you feel like any of that kind of helped shape to get you where you are today?
Oh, for sure. I think it unlocked the idea that gaming was much more than what my parents and what adults were saying it was.
Right.
I mean, I also went to a school where everybody had a laptop.
Yep.
And we figured out how to host Call of Duty 1 and Halo 2 games during class online. Like teachers didn't know we were playing, but we were playing. And it connected so many folks that I had never known or met before or would have any interaction with outside of gaming. And also watching my friends who might not have been passionate about school or struggled in school, how passionate they were and how knowledgeable and smart they were with stuff that they cared about.
Yep.
Really shaped how I viewed gaming and esports in a scholastic space. And that definitely shaped how I've gone about esports and how I got into it full time and things of that sort. So yeah, definitely shaped my thoughts on the space and what it can potentially be.
I like what you said there about like, other friends that maybe weren't, super into school or the academics that they were presented with didn't have any allure to them, right? Like I feel like I was the same way. Music was that first thing for me that really was like, this is the road I'm going to go down, like obviously gaming was part of that. But, I think that that's such an important thing, especially now in the scholastic space, is like connecting with students on their level, right? Like meeting them where they are and presenting an opportunity, be like, hey, there's so many things to learn that are beneficial to you that you're going to need out in the real world. But by doing this stuff, and they think, oh, I'm just playing video games, cool. Like, so I really like that kind of take that you have there of really focusing on like, or at least identifying and seeing like people that typically weren't doing great, really kind of turn it around because they were into something, and they had that passion.
Yeah, I mean, I saw I saw adults at my high school administrators, teachers, even like other students talk about some of my friends, like how lazy they were, how dumb they were, like they struggled in school, they weren't doing their assignments. And I was like, that's not who this person is. Like this dude's way smarter than all of us. He's just really smart at stuff he cares about, which just happens to be Halo, Call of Duty, like whatever we're gaming on. You ask that person to write an essay on, I don't know, the difference between how a patch affects gameplay in League of Legends. Like, they'll spew it out and it'll be super high quality and way more intellectual than you could even comprehend. It was just, they're not passionate about the traditional way of teaching or whatever you're teaching about. So yeah. And at the time it never clicked like, hey, gaming could be this tool or this, we should bring it into scholastic or into high schools to like engage students. Like that never crossed my mind at the time. It wasn't a thing. But as an adult and going back and working in the high school space before collegiate, like I understood how much of a motivator it could be.
Yeah. And obviously you made that transition too, right? Like you were a gamer, hanging out, doing whatever. And then you turned the corner and now you're coaching. Now you're a leader. Like talk to me about that first kind of transition for you.
Yeah. I mean, college, I was business major right out of college. I managed a Target store, hated it, hated retail, and ended up as a marketing director at a high school. I just always have had this drawn back to students and being able to impact students in a positive way. And the second high school I ended up being at as a marketing director, kind of with a few years under my belt, of working in a high school space, I saw a kid wearing an esports jersey. And my thought process immediately was, I still game with my high school buddies. How do I create those opportunities for that, for those friendships to form in a more um, in a more direct way, or how can I be that initiator? And that's what spawned into a club that I was volunteering to run, which then turned into a team. And it was, and I used to tell people at the time I was working at this as a coach for a high school team. I would tell people I just unlocked the door. I'm the key guy. Like that's all I'm doing. Students are driving this, and they're the ones. I'm not even coaching. Like and that was, I mean, it just kept growing. I don't know. Students kept pushing it. I kept pushing it. And eventually I'm in an athletic director's office at a college answering questions about esports. And then they're offering me a full-time job.
That's awesome.
It was crazy. The speed and kind of how things changed. Like I said, I would have never expected I'd go full-time into esports, but I'm glad I did. I love it. So
and that was West Catholic High School.
West Catholic.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I was, it's funny because the question was like, what motivated you to start this? But obviously that was it. Seeing, that's first spark of a kid wearing, a jersey. That's pretty awesome. So then you moved to this. You're interviewing for a position. Where was this position at?
That was Aquinas College, and I didn't even know I was interviewing. I mean, I was getting my master's at the time at Aquinas, and the funny story is I wanted to start a gaming team on campus.
Right.
And I went into the student life office, and the person in charge at the time, when I asked like, hey, can I start a gaming club or something? Their response was, you're a graduate student. You don't pay student fees or student life fees. So you're not allowed to start a club. And I was like, that's stupid.
Yeah, it's dumb.
So I went above him. And I emailed the president, CC'd his boss, things of that sort. And I don't know how long later, but I got an email from the athletic director asking if I'd come in and answer some questions about esports.
Yeah.
And I answered a bunch of questions, a bunch of like, this is what's happening around the country. This is what the games that are big, et cetera.
Right.
What it looked like if you were going to start a team. It was probably an hour meeting. I got an email like maybe a couple weeks later to come in for another meeting. And the end of the meeting was, hey, we're thinking about offering you the full-time job. Like, would you be interested? And I was like, let me talk to some people. Yeah. And they basically offered to match the salary I was getting at the high school as a marketing person to come do esports full time. And I said, why not? Let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the interview, it wasn't even an interview. I don't know. It was just answering questions. And it was an interesting experience. That's for sure.
I love that. So with obviously establishing the program, now you're building something from scratch because it didn't exist there, right?
Yeah. Right.
What were some of the first steps that you took to try to build them a collegiate program?
Yeah. They're like, well, they basically said, this is the space we have. This is the budget we have. And we've gotten some initial numbers from people, but now it's your job. And I threw out the numbers they got me because I didn't like the company they were working with or the numbers they were getting. And shopped around, talked to some people, built a lab, and started recruiting students to come, I guess, believe in this pipe dream I have. And at the time, there was only 4 or 5 varsity teams at the college level in Michigan. Now there's about 25. It was a lot easier, I would say, to find super talented students. It might have been harder to convince them to take the leap to esports because it was so much newer. But it was just like messaging hundreds, if not thousands of people on Twitter, on whatever I had at the time of like, hey, you looking to get a college degree? And a lot of the DMs were like, hey, are you looking at college? Are you a college age student? I don't know.
Like, I have no clue.
You could be a 40-year-old with 3 degrees. I don't know, but here's a DM. And yeah, it happened. I got, I think, 12 students that first fall. I was hired in March and we had to start a team in August. I would never recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, that's a quick turnaround.
Yeah, it was, and building a lab, and we didn't have the lab open until the end of July, so it was really selling students on this pipe dream of we have it coming. It's not here yet, but
you did it, and
yeah.
you had a pretty successful Rocket League team. Talk a little bit about
crazy.
that.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so in like 2018 or 2019 when we started this, there was an SSL rank. And there's only one GC for my Rocket League folks. There wasn't a GC 1, 2, 3. It was just GC. With like a full Champ 2 roster, you could probably qualify for CRL. Now you have to have a full SSL team, maybe even a pro or two on your team to get into CRL. Very different environment.
Right.
But we ended up having a really decent roster. And at the time, NACE was a lot less competitive. There was only one CRL team in NACE, which was Mizzou. And we ended up going on some crazy playoff run and ended up in the NACE National Championship fall of 2019 at DreamHack Atlanta.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was so great. I think one of my like highlight moments of coaching so far was that night when we qualified for LAN. I actually bought sparkling grape juice from the grocery store down the street before the match. And when we won, I was like, all right, guys, we're going to the parking lot. And we went down to the parking lot and we shook these sparkling grape juice bottles and sprayed them all over the sidewalk. And it was so hype. It was so awesome. Yeah, we just we had a good coach at the time. His name's Marshall. He's not in esports anymore. But he looked at coaching and developing talent differently than most folks did at the time. And looking at drills, looking at training packs, and instead of just jumping in scrims for countless hours on end, we were developing talent. And I think we also at the time had a student whose parent was a sports and performance psychologist, and worked with our program, did like 2 days of like mental skills training stuff. And I think that really helped as well. Yeah, it was a crazy run for a small school in Aquinas or in Grand Rapids, Michigan. No one had ever heard of. We found some really cool success.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I really like what you just said there too, was like that it wasn't just like coaching, right? Like we were developing talent. And I think that's a big difference. I mean, obviously having a coach is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's all that you can have is that. But when you really are getting into those other areas, I think that's really powerful. And talk to us a little bit about what that looked like. Like what was the kind of path to develop that talent?
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with tracking where our students were from a competitive standpoint and their play perspective.
Yeah,
identifying what was important for us to be successful, and then trying to make them better at those specific things. So we talked with some pro teams at the time to see what they were doing in terms of practicing. And we found out that a lot of them were doing a lot of 1v1 games. We started every practice mainly either doing weird air dribbling drills for like 20, 30 minutes or 1v1 games, which our players hated, but we knew was an effective strategy at the time.
Yeah.
And they were doing an hour of that. And then we'd hop into scrims and do VOD reviews and things of that sort. But it was doing things that our students necessarily didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But that's what you got to do as a coach. Sometimes it's a lot about that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that like a lot of our success, and I mentioned Marshall, but like a lot of our success as a program happened because of the coaches we had. And at the time, I didn't have any budget for coaches. These were all volunteers. They happened to be in the area. And I'll shout out a couple of them because some of you have heard of them. But Chris Bilski, who's at Michigan State now, was one of my League of Legends coaches. Carl Leone, who's the director at Oakland University, was our main League of Legends coach. Marshall was our Rocket League coach. And we had a great Smash coach locally. He goes by Shadow. But we just had this all-star group of coaches that I could not put together without money at this point in time.
For sure.
So I look back on my career so far, and there's just so much luck, and like I don't want to say everything was luck, but being open to that luck and exploring opportunities that might put us in a more lucky position, maybe. But but without luck and without some people trusting me, it'd be a very different story, I think. And I got to give them all a shout out.
Yeah.
And obviously my students, amazing.
Jacob from chat has a question here. How important is buy-in from administration when it comes to collegiate esports? And what advice would you give to folks that are building an esports program when it comes to talking to the administration?
I would say that one of my greatest weaknesses is talking to administration and getting buy-in. So I'm not the person to ask. I was brought into Aquinas and they already had set resources allocated. Right. I did not do a good job at getting more resources than that. I would say that looking back, and I know now, like the greatest decision, and part of that was on me. I'm not a huge advocate for myself in that regard. Like I'm somebody who's like, okay, this is our budget. We're going to make the most out of it, and then put my head down in terms of that and make it happen. I'm not someone knocking down doors to get more resources. But I would say that I don't believe that administration was open to that feedback or that conversation, even if I was more comfortable with it. And I think leaving Aquinas was the best thing I did for my own mental health and my professional career. And I think I talk with a lot of directors in the space, right, and they talk about their issues with administration and what they're getting in terms of resources. And sometimes I look at them and I say, like, this could be another Aquinas situation where they're just not open to the idea. They're not listening.
Right.
And some admins aren't open to that. I would look at programs like Maryville, who has gotten huge buy-in from their administration. I just listened. There's actually a podcast episode. Dr. Lombardi, who is the president of Maryville University, does a podcast, and he just interviewed Dan recently. It's on Spotify, all other places. But their conversation is awesome. I'm actually going to formulate an email and send it to our president and a couple other admins. And they talk about why esports is important to Maryville.
Yeah.
And he's just gotten full buy-in. So reach out to other folks in the space. I'm not the expert when it comes to talking to admins, unfortunately.
What about the follow-up question to that is, how did you get the administration to stop looking at you as a student when you were transitioning to full-time staff?
Yeah, I have a much different experience with that because I, at the time, was a grad student. So right. I didn't go there for my undergrad. I went somewhere else. So I never had the problems of being looked at as an undergrad student. And I don't envy those folks who are in that position and trying to become that. I had a little bit of that experience when I went to work for my high school. And a lot of it just had to do with showcasing my knowledge of the space and how much I had grown and matured and how I can, and showing that I can look at a situation with maturity instead of just emotion. And I think that helped in that regard, but it's a tough one.
Well, it's a great answer. And I think it's time for one of the bigger shakeups in your life. You came down to hang out with us in Florida.
I did.
You just said, "Hey, Michigan, you stay here. I'm gonna come on down to Florida." Talk to me about Florida Southern College and that decision. I mean, that's a huge change, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and moving to Florida, that was unheard of, right? Like, so for you, like, what was that like? What kind of on that and talk to me about your experience coming down here to Florida.
Yeah, I would say, like, personally, first off, like I grew up in Michigan, but then moved to St. Louis, and then my parents moved to South Carolina before moving back. So I've moved before. And I think for folks who haven't moved that far, it might seem daunting. So I'll put that out there that, like, I've had a little experience with that.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was at a place where it was like, I need to get out of this position and find something that I can grow into. The position was brought to my attention. I did a couple interviews. I actually was interviewing at a couple schools at the time, and Florida Southern was not at the top of my list. And I went about, especially the salary negotiation part, with that type of mentality of, like, I don't really care if they don't like this. I mean, I had even had one person interviewing me who ended up being one of my bosses say, like, all right, are you the guy? And I was like, I'm the guy. That was my response.
I'm the guy.
And then we talked about salary, and I was like, hey, I heard there's a range. I want the top of the range. Or else I'm not coming. And someone listening in the other room was like, that is the most stern I've ever heard you talk, ever. I'm like, I don't know. It worked.
It worked.
But yeah, I don't think I'll ever do that again. But I didn't even visit Florida Southern.
Really?
I looked at pictures online. They asked, hey, do you want us to fly you down? I was like, no, I think it looks pretty. I like your answers. And I think this is a place I can grow.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to have an administration who wants to build and support esports the way I want to. So I flew down. Or I didn't fly down. I moved.
Yeah.
Packed up everything. It was like 2 weeks later. I was moving to Florida, which was crazy. I lived in an Airbnb for a month before we found a house. I will say those are the two best. I reported to the athletic director and the dean of students, and those are to this day the two best bosses I've ever had. And I absolutely loved my time there. It was a school that truly embraced esports, wanted to support it, not at the level of like a Maryville. They weren't giving full rides, but they had an academic program. They had plenty of budget. They had two dedicated spaces. I had a practice room and an arena. And everyone on campus knew of esports.
Yeah.
And that was such an awesome experience coming from where I was before. And I absolutely loved it. And I loved being near you all. I mean, y'all are just nice people. If I ever needed something,
nice
like I knew one of the Full Sail folks would be like right there. Ethan is the director at Southeastern in Lakeland, same city. We would have Waffle House every month, and he's awesome. It was just like a great mental check-in and like, hey, what are you up to? How you doing? And I didn't have that previously. And it was just awesome. And like living in Florida, people are like, oh, I'll never live there. It's crazy. When you're down there in December and it's 60 degrees, you don't care. It's amazing. Yeah. I miss the weather so much. It was great. It was cool.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think getting back to Michigan was good with my family. I mean, parents are getting older,
right.
So that's always something. It was hard for that thing, but professionally, I loved it. It was great.
Well, we loved having you here, even though it was a short time, right? We got to go tour your campus, beautiful campus. Adam put out all of the trophies on display. I just want to make sure everyone knows they were all on display. It was nice. So
I found a trophy case sitting in some shed on campus. I bought some lights. That might be like my crowning achievement from that one. That was pretty cool.
It was a good time. We had a blast coming over and saying hi and seeing what you guys do. And obviously still big fans of Florida Southern and what they're doing. So sad that you have gone and left Florida, but obviously, the time here and time spent was great. But in 2021, you won college, or the 2021 to 2022 season, I guess, right? College Coach of the Year for NACAD. Talk to me a little bit about what that means, man.
I don't know. I just was told. I got a message out of like the blue from someone at NACAD asking, "Hey, do you actually coach any of the teams?" I was like, "Yeah, I coach the Academy League of Legends team," and that was it. And then like a month later, I saw a tweet that like I had won something, and I was like, "Oh, this is dope." I mean, it's just great to get recognition. And it's kind of funny that like I've basically from between NACE and NACAD, I've won the two awards. And NACE, I won League of Legends Coach of the Year, which I really wasn't the coach. And then for NACAD, I won Coach of the Year. I haven't won anything director related. And that's been if not all of my job. So it's weird, but yeah, I mean, it's great receiving recognition. I think I don't remember which award it was. It might've been NACAD, but it was one of the first awards that I actually won. And instead of like it being a great positive experience, I think it was for me internally was a pretty negative one, because it reminded me all I could think about was all the times I hadn't won and how that
Yeah.
felt. And now that,
Fair.
yeah, I won it, but there's way more people who have that feeling
Yeah.
of not winning.
Yeah.
And that sucks. The first award I won, I think that really hit for a long time. I've learned through folks talking to me and Doc
Right.
obviously messaging me that like getting an award is not just a celebration of you, but it's also the celebration of people who believe in you and who've sacrificed things for you. And I think that's a good way to frame it too. Yeah, I think it was cool.
Yeah. Good. And obviously good advice from Doc. If you ever need anything, apparently he's on Cameo now. So that's always a plus there. We'll get into that. We'll get into that later. Talk to me about teaching now. Obviously you left Florida. Talk to us about your current position, what you do. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. I've always wanted to teach, even like working at the high school. I've always like wanted the opportunity to teach a class, because I've had great teachers in the past that I kind of want to, I don't know, be like and have that positive, influence, I guess, or experience to give to students. I've been at prior institutions who've alluded at the idea of letting me teach, but never let me. The Ferris position came up at a great time in my personal life. And then it was teaching. And I love it. I love it. I love teaching. It's a little different because this degree is fully online. So all my classes are online outside of an intro to game design course that I'm teaching and taught last fall and the spring. So it's a little different. It's not as one-on-one or that connection as I think I really truly love.
Right.
But I love teaching, and I love the idea of thinking through what do I wish I knew before I got into esports, or what do people who are hiring in esports want students to know. That's cool. I just love it. It's fun. I think it's
that's a great question. And is like, what essential skills or qualities are going to help make you successful in the esports professional, like not professional like player, but like the being a professional in this industry. What is that? What should you have as a grad or a student going into that? What do those qualities look like?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to make a career in esports. So it's hard to answer that one question. What I liked about Ferris's program, and I've looked at a lot of different degree programs in esports, and there are some good ones. There are some, I would say, not good ones. But what I liked about Ferris is I liked the content, but I really liked how it was esports production. Like it's a very much focus on content creation and professional video production. And it's a focus on learning those hard skills. And I really liked it. It's unique to the space. I think that's cool. But yeah, the reality is that students who come through that program or any program might want to do X in esports or Y in esports. But knowing what you need to know, or at least an intro on X and Y, I think is important. Not only to succeed in that career, but also to know what you might want to do or not want to do as well. So
now coming back home to West Michigan, you've been kind of diving into the community. You're a part of the West Michigan Sports Commission for their like esports task force, which is awesome. Talk to us a little bit about what that means and what you guys are doing there.
Yeah. They were a lot more active prior to me moving. I was actually involved with them before I moved to Florida. And they basically identified esports as an opportunity to bring events to West Michigan. What they did is they kind of gathered some experts. I happened to have a connection with them at the time, so they reached out to me, and I gave a couple extra names, and we started meeting regularly. They actually hosted a League of Legends tournament back in like 2020. And now we have a Discord server with the folks from the Sports Commission, and then like a bunch of folks from West Michigan who are in esports. And we're always talking about pitches that are being made of bringing certain events to West Michigan, as well as who we might know in the region or in the industry who might be looking to bring events. And we've been really lucky because we have two amazing casters in West Michigan. James Bott is one of the top Rocket League casters, and he happens to live in West Michigan. And then Moses from Counter-Strike, whose dad taught at Aquinas when I was there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Is one of the top Counter-Strike casters. So they're both in our Discord server and super active and engaging. They want to bring esports to West Michigan too. So it's really fun.
That's awesome. What sort of like advice do you give maybe through that commission or just in general? I know, working at Fulsa, we have a lot of high schools and middle schools that are reaching out to us to talk about, hey, help us get esports started. What does that look for you guys, and kind of how do you explore that integration into their programs for esports?
Yeah. A lot of times those, especially high schools, have had some initial conversations, but they don't understand the details, and they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I usually set up a meeting to come visit or to sit down with them, and they rapid fire questions. Yeah. I was just at a school, Northview High School. They have a space identified. They have some staff members who are willing to help. One of them comes from a collegiate program locally, but they weren't confident in what they were looking for, or how many PCs to start with, those types of questions.
Right.
And my goal has always been like to be a resource, however I can be. So in some instances that's answering a billion questions. Some instances it's going to sit down with a principal, and just in one instance, it was literally me just sitting in the room saying I'm a professor of esports, and then letting them continue the conversation, because sometimes they just needed a legitimate quote unquote person in the room to make it sound like, to make sure that everyone knows like they're not crazy.
Right. Yeah.
So I just want to be a resource. So it really does vary. But I'm an open book. I mean, that's been my stance since starting in collegiate. And a lot of that, even my show that I do every week, like it started because I came into collegiate esports not knowing what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I saw people like Dan, I'm going to put him on blast, putting out these cryptic tweets about how everyone in collegiate esports is dumb or whatever, not doing things right. And I'm sitting here as a new director like, oh, he's talking about me. I don't know what I'm doing wrong or how to do better.
Right.
And it eventually spawned into me being like, okay, I've done this for a year. Let me start sharing this information with newer directors so they don't have that same experience. And that's been a goal of mine, is just to be sharing things. So I have resources in my community Discord. I just create and send out for free.
That's awesome.
And just answering questions as much as I can.
One thing that I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think a lot of people know, is that you're a pretty good photographer. And you travel the country doing different events, whether that's esports or things like DreamHack. I'm lucky enough to get to see you all the time when I'm on the road. Talk to us a little bit about your photography background.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I'm a good. Well, I guess I'm an okay photographer.
I like the photos you take, man. You know,
I don't know.
They may be of me, but you know,
there's only like 10 really good esports photographers, and I compare all my stuff to those 10 people, which is probably, and that's 10 in the world. I don't know. Only a couple are from the US. So my comparisons are probably irrational. But no, I was a marketing director at a high school. I had access to a camera, and I was kind of getting more involved in esports in general and excited about it. And I looked at the camera and said, how do I use this to get into esports events for free? So I just started taking photos. And I love it. And I love the look on people's faces when they see photos of themselves. I love when people use my photos as their profile pictures. Like, I love when people tag me in tweets that blow up that are like, thanks for the photo.
Yep.
That's fun. But yeah, I really like photography. I'm not nearly as good as some folks who are super passionate about it. I got to shout out Cora.
Cora's great.
Fairly recently started photography. She is insane in terms of how talented she is. I think she's better than me. I don't think she'd ever admit it, but she's so good. And I'm slightly jealous. But yeah, I enjoy it. And I've recently, when I went to TwitchCon, I didn't bring my camera, and I realized how overstimulating gaming events are when I'm not stuck with my head in the lens and kind of focused on my safe thing. So now my camera is basically like my safe place at these overstimulating events. So yeah, no, I love it. It's good. I don't make a ton of money from it. It's just like the DreamHack's like my only consistent client in esports. Yeah, I just like it. It's fun.
Well, I always enjoy getting the photos of DreamHack events and TwitchCon, and obviously being able to see it out on the road. Since you're not here in Florida anymore is always a good thing, catching up. But getting back to the esports stuff, what do you feel like is the biggest misconception that people have, or at least frequently encounter for you, and how do you address them?
Which people?
It's a great question. I'm going to let you decide which one you want to address.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's I would say that most of the folks I interact with think that gaming is just sitting in front of a computer all day and being super antisocial, being fat, lazy, etc. I think we all know that those folks who are in the industry and around this, that it's the exact opposite. I have gamer friends who are the quietest people in person when around people they aren't comfortable with, but are the most talkative people if you get them on a microphone and playing games like League of Legends. Same thing as I talked about earlier about that gaming excites some folks who might not be excited about other things. The gaming community and the communities made through gaming and esports are some of the strongest communities I've ever seen or been a part of. I don't know if gamers realize that because they might not have communities outside of gaming. And folks not in gaming obviously don't recognize that, but it's crazy. I mean, there are people I've met online who I never saw, played with them for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I'm driving across the country to meet them. I don't think that happens outside of gaming. And that's pretty awesome. But then also the fat, lazy part, I mean, just look at, some of the players on my teams or any team, they're skinny. Some of them go to the gym more than most people, I guess. I don't know what the comparison is there. But yeah, they're not lazy. So that's it. And then I always get the parents who are like, so you encourage my kid to play 8 hours a day? I'm like, no, I limit practice to 2 hours. Yeah. Your student can improve better than they're improving now by just playing 2 hours in a more effective and pointed way. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Lots of misconceptions.
Yeah, no, I like that. There's another chat question from PB and John. They say, do you consider yourself almost like a Swiss knife when it comes to your multimedia competencies combined with your esports experience?
Great question. I wish I enjoyed editing video more than I do.
Okay.
I would have a lot more paid opportunities in esports if I liked video, but any mundane tasks, and I consider editing a mundane task that I can't listen to music while I'm doing it, I don't enjoy. So I don't like doing video, and video's massive right now. Yep. Especially when it comes to short form stuff. So I would not consider myself a multimedia Swiss knife in that regard. I just like taking photos and going to esports stuff. So, but there's plenty of opportunity to other folks for doing video, even doing photos if that's what you want.
Yeah, so. The editing front is a huge market, man. There's so many, especially, most of the big content creators, some of them do. I don't want to discredit that. Most of them have people that are editing their videos for them, and that's got to be a great life. You just get in front, do the thing, and then someone else does it. But that's a big deal, man. There's a lot of opportunity in that space, and those skills are super sought after. So We just gotta figure out a way to make them interesting for you. Like
True.
you get some more kids,
Yeah.
right?
I did edit like a year-end recap video for Instagram, and the experience wasn't bad. Like, it was good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It wasn't terrible. I make it sound like it's torturous, but it's just not something I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, something that you do enjoy, and I think it's been like a big part of kind of your world, lately, is mental health. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know that's a thing that you're super passionate about, and something that really has been a focal point for you.
Yeah, I was passionate about it more than a year ago, but again, it hit my life about a year ago.
Yeah.
But early 20s, I really struggled with anxiety and panic attacks type stuff, and as well as undiagnosed ADHD, as I would find out later on. Figuring all that out and being put on all sorts of different medications to try to solve things was a horrible experience that I don't envy anyone or wish on anyone. But about a year ago, for those of you who know me better or know me personally, I got divorced, and that hit hard.
Yeah.
I had been married for about 7 years to a woman I met in high school, and I was working at Florida Southern, and then I found out I was getting divorced, and it was bad. I didn't know what my purpose was at that point. And I was in a really dark place. And thankfully I had a lot of people, especially folks from the esports industry and my collegiate esports community, reaching out and checking in and trying their best to be there for me. But it was tough. I would sit at my computer being like, hey, I'm going to game. And I would just stare at my screen for like hours. Like, nothing seemed great to me. I found Instagram reels scrolling for hours on end. But eventually I realized that I would look up at the time after scrolling for hours and be like, oh, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm not tired.
Yeah.
So after probably a month of doing that, I decided I'd start walking until I was tired enough to sleep. And that turned out to be walking 1 to 2 hours every night, which then eventually turned into 2 sessions of walking 1 to 2 hours each. And that eventually turned into running. And I have ran a lot, like 700 miles from March until December.
That's
and then
crazy.
I just ran 10 miles today. And running and checking in on my physical health and starting to count calories, I would argue probably saved my life, is how I would put it. And that seems extreme and dramatic, but that's what I truly believe. It ended up being a release of energy, anxiety, worries, but a time to reflect.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's great. And that whole experience, getting divorced was the reason I had to leave Florida and Florida Southern. I was not looking to leave that school at the time.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful that there was an opportunity like the Ferris one,
Yeah.
back where my family was and doing what I wanted to try out. And I love it. And everything kind of works out for a reason, I would say. I run a lot. I love it. There are days where I don't like it, especially when it's freezing temperatures. But yeah, from my peak in 2018, I've lost 60 to 70 pounds. About 20 to 30 of that has been in the last year. Ran my first marathon in October. I'm signed up for 2 more this year. And
Congrats.
I'm stoked.
That's awesome, man.
I'm stoked. Yeah. And I recommend anyone to, and I'll say, like, most of the weight I lost over the last year was when I was walking, not running. So, but yeah, it was such a great outlet for me. And I had never ran before that. The first day I ran, like last February or March, I ran a mile because I was like, I'm faster than I think I'm pretty fast. And by the end of the mile, I ran faster than I probably thought I could, but things were going white. It was bad. It was real rough. And then my first 5K, which was like in April, things were going white again. That was, yeah, but you kind of start somewhere. And now I ran 10 miles today and it was fan-freaking-tastic.
That's
It
awesome,
was
man.
great.
Good for you.
So yeah.
You can
Big
follow
fan.
along with most of your running journeys on your socials, right? You post.
I do. Instagram is more of my stories. It's like where you can follow all my running stuff. I try to keep that off the Twitter. I think it'd get annoying. Not really the target audience. I do some on my Twitter. I'll post like a once a month update, but yeah, that's on my Insta.
Well, speaking of Twitter, I feel like we couldn't have you on the show if we didn't talk about Twitter here in the last maybe 10 minutes of the conversation. Obviously, Twitter's an interesting place these days, and I will still call it Twitter. We're not changing. But talk to me a little bit about what's going on, man. You are always like the go-to guy. You have the opinion. You have a tweet, and sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad. Like what is it? What is it about?
I haven't been canceled, I don't think yet. So,
good.
I would say that for the most part, I'm a fairly logical person. I'm not putting stuff that's illogical out there, but yeah, there's definitely folks who don't agree with some of the stuff I say. But again, like when I first really got started in Twitter and collegiate esports Twitter, it was the goal was to take down some of those barriers that new directors were facing in terms of knowledge. So it has evolved into me sitting on a soapbox sometimes, but that's been the goal. Wow, more recently, I think a lot of my content is geared around sharing what's happening in collegiate esports, and a lot of times that happens to be negative things or a negative type of story, negative conversation, or like heated conversation.
Right.
I'm not the person who's like, we shouldn't have these conversations on Twitter. We should wait until we're in person, or we should hop in a call and handle this silently, because there's been so many years of things happening behind closed doors, and people aren't getting access to that information. I'm a huge advocate of putting it out on Twitter, even though, yes, it would be more effective to solve individual problems in person. That's just not the reality of the situation with a lot of this stuff. But I retweet positive stuff happening. I retweet more heated stuff that's happening. I think recently, what I've found, I'm obviously passionate about the academic side of esports and the opportunities it gives students. I find myself, at least yesterday, I got super adrenaline rush going, like ready for war, which is not healthy. But I find with myself needing to defend this because I feel so passionate about it, first of all. Second of all, I don't think there's enough people defending it. It sounded like the conversation was so anti-academics, and there was no one really stepping up to be positive about it. And sometimes it just takes the first person to be positive for other people to realize, like, okay, I'm not the only one. Like I'm not fearful of being the only one. I don't know if I'm the soldier or like some, I don't know, thinking like I'm altruistic or some weird thing there, but like someone needs to defend it. Like someone has to present the other side. And if no one else, I'll do it. I think the most frustration I have on the Twitter timeline is when folks are making assumptions or making stances, but they don't have all the information. They're only coming at it and making stances based on the information they have on one side of the argument. That's been the premise of a lot of the last 48 hours. But yeah, that's that. Yeah, I need to stop. I'm looking back. I'm like, I was too, like, I got too emotionally invested. I recognize that looking back, but I also know how important it is for someone to step up.
But it's also hard to not get emotionally invested sometimes with some of that stuff, because it's part of your job, like, I mean,
especially when I just gave up a great job to come be a professor at another place. Like I gave up a lot to do this, and I have what feels like the entire industry saying that my job is useless, and what we're giving students and what students are paying for and investing in is useless, and it hurts. And it's frustrating because I know they haven't looked at what courses we're teaching or what we're actually teaching in those courses. They're just making an assumption.
Yeah.
And
it's easy to like just see something and then repeat it and give a take on something that you haven't put research into or taken the time to at least hear why this is a good thing, right? No, it's just, this is stupid, right? So I definitely agree with you on that. And, you know, even like Sarah in the chat says also the article in question was a paid promotion article.
Oh, that's
it was created for engagement.
Oh my gosh.
And
well, it got the engagement. I don't know if the school got what they wanted, but that's fascinating. I didn't even look at that part.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously, I think it's important to always take a breath, right? And sometimes it's not worth, you know, sometimes it's people try to get you into the conversation and, you know, I have this thing where I'll go through and be like, all right, who's in this? Where does it start? And what's going on? And I'll look through and then I'll go through I'm not going to argue with this guy. Correct. Doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. What this person is putting out to the world via their timeline, I'm definitely not aligned with, but it's like one of those things like, I'm not going to waste my time. Like there's no point. I'm not going to convert this person. They already feel this specific way. So I'm just going to leave that over there, you know, and that's while having a stance that I think is important, you know, and saying your piece. I think that's very clear. And I commend you for doing that. Cause it's hard to do sometimes. Especially with the blender, you know, like
well, tough. And it is tough, especially when you see people you look up to and draw conclusions from making stances like that and being so strong against or with that stance that they've come up with. It hurts. It hurts and it's tough. And it was a tough day on Twitter. It affected my mental a little bit too much, but when I got off Twitter, my now girlfriend is very good at like no phones. Like she's very anti-phone. So like when I get home, basically right after work, like I don't even look at my phone, which I've never done before. Like I live on Twitter. Everyone knows I live on Twitter, but there are days I don't even look at my phone, which is crazy, but it's so good for my mental health.
That is good. That is good. And you ran what? You said you're 10 miles too? So
I did. I ran 10 miles today. So and I don't check Twitter when I'm running usually, unless if stuff's super like feisty on the timeline. I'll pull out my phone while I'm running. But that's very rare. So, and yesterday when I got super, and I think there's a tie into this. I didn't run yesterday. And I think when I don't run, I also have some extra like energy and anxiety and also like energy to put towards fighting with people. And I think that came out internally a little bit more than I'd like. But yeah, that's fun stuff.
Hey, you know, well,
I don't recommend it to people. I tell students don't be me all the time. Like, no, it's helped me. I mean, I would say that like the brand I've created on Twitter and social media and the type of stuff I've put out there has given me opportunities to be seen as a quote unquote leader to some folks and given me opportunities to speak. But it's a fine line that I wouldn't recommend most folks kind of playing with. So.
Well, Adam, obviously, always a good friend of Full Sail and appreciate you spending some time with me tonight. Any final thoughts before we go?
Thank you so much for having me. I love the Full Sail folks. You, Sari, Jacob are all amazing now. AJ, I mean, the list is now continuing to grow. So more names to remember is going to be rough for me. I apologize. But you all are amazing, Full Sail. I loved touring the facility, being there a couple times for different events. It was awesome. And then since no one's being super positive about stuff, about the esports industry, I just say like, I'm ignoring all that doom and gloom stuff because I know how passionate our students are. I know how the collegiate esports space is growing, and I know the potential that the esports industry has moving forward in a more sustainable way. And I'm stoked about it. I'm high on esports, obviously still. So really excited about it. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Where can everybody find you if they don't already follow you? Where can they follow you?
Twitter at Coach Antor. I believe Instagram is the same there. And then Discord is the same. So Coach Antor everywhere. Yeah, reach out if you've got questions.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. Next episode, Eugene Fryer will be our guest. Super excited about that. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today, and we will see you next time. Have a good one.